In this video, I'm going to go over the 3 lenses that I use for my Fuji X-T3 for recording video. This includes the pros, the cons, and some sample footage. Hey everyone, Tanya here from Creative Nest. Welcome back to my channel. Before I get into talking about the Fuji lenses, I'm just gonna ask that you please subscribe to my channel. If you get anything out of this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you have anything you'd like to share over the course of this video, whether it's advice or an opinion or you have any questions, I encourage you to leave comments below. All right, let's talk about lenses. While some people may think of the Fuji as an underdog brand or a limited brand, I'd just like to start off by saying that Fuji has done a phenomenal job in ensuring that their users have no shortage of glass to pick from. I'm only going to focus on the 3 that I own and have in my kit for the purpose of this video. So to give you some background about myself and my use of the Fuji X-T3, I'm a full-time freelance videographer and editor. I'm shooting anywhere from 3 to 4 times a week, sometimes more in the busy season, and so my gear is in constant use. I shoot everything from weddings and events to interviews for corporate segments, editorials, sports, fashion, you name it. Because lenses are so goddamn expensive, I like to make sure I'm not wasting money or precious camera bag space on something I don't actually need. So without further ado, here are my 3 favorite lenses for shooting video on the Fuji X-T3. Rokinon 12mm 2.0. Is it 2.0 or is it just 2? I feel like I've never actually heard anyone say it, but now I'm not confident. I'm a big fan of Rokinon lenses. Having moved over from Canon, I was very happy to discover that there was in fact a mount for Fuji and the X series. Just like previous Rokinon lenses that I've used in the past, it is fully manual. There is a little bit of a trick to popping manual lenses onto your Fuji. I learned the hard way, popped it on for a shoot. When I got to the shoot, I hadn't actually used it in a shoot environment yet, and the camera wasn't recognizing it. So there is a bit of a process you have to go into to get your camera to recognize a manual lens. You pretty much have to let your camera know to shoot without a lens, and then it'll recognize it. That's the right word. I personally rely quite heavily on peaking. Just be aware that it doesn't have any automatic features. It's just you and the lens. I mostly use the 12mm for weddings and events to grab nice and wide what's happening in the room. It also happens to look really great when you do long walking shots if you just pop the camera onto a gimbal. I personally use the Crane Plus. Lastly, it is phenomenal for grabbing those large, wide establishing shots for short film or editorial situations. Chances are you're not going to be using it a ton. However, it satisfies a need that really is worth it in terms of the diversity of your shots. It's worth noting that Rokinon also happens to make an 8mm and a 10mm. Those happen to be at 2.8 rather than 2. While I haven't used them myself, I'm just gonna assume that they're great because the 12mm is also great. This is the 12mm. I've been pointing at this. This is what I wanted to point at. Holy, it is like 1,000 degrees in here. As a side, if you happen to think that the Fuji being a crop sensor camera is a downside or a con, I do encourage you to check out my other video where I do a side-by-side comparison of the Fuji X-T3 versus the Sony a7 III. They're comparable in many ways. However, the a7 III happens to be a full-frame camera. I go a little bit more in depth about why I specifically as a videographer selected the Fuji X-T3. So go check that out if you happen to be curious about it. All right, moving on. Fuji 35mm 2.0. I'm just gonna keep saying 2.0. 2 just sounds weird. This is my go-to lens for interviews. It also happens to already be on the gimbal. The image is obviously very sharp, but with a fast aperture at 2, it means that I can achieve that soft blurred out background. Downside to this lens, which I didn't realize until I purchased it, popped it on, and then was like, oh my God, this sucks. The lens does not have optical stabilization built in. Worth noting that the 12mm doesn't have that either. However, 35mm on a crop sensor is a lot less forgiving when it comes to handheld, whereas the 12, it's not really that noticeable because the image you're grabbing is so much wider. I haven't noticed the lack of OS to be a big issue, mostly because whenever I'm using this lens, it's usually for an interview and it's on a tripod, or I'm using it at the end of the night, let's say the end of the reception, because it's a 2, so I can, handle low light pretty well. Again, it's gonna be on the stabilizer. So I'm not doing a ton of handheld shooting with this lens, and therefore it's not super noticeable. And while it doesn't have OS built in, it is worth noting that it does have automatic features like autofocus and auto aperture. I need to go outside and just roll around in the grass or something, because it's like 40 degrees. I'm struggling. And moving on to the 3rd lens in my kit, which is my personal favorite, Fuji 18 to 55mm 2.8 to 4. Yes, I did just use a long-winded synonym for stock lens. Now, before the camera snobs start ferociously slamming on their keyboards. Have a look at this. Most of the work that I do is run and gun shooting. So whether it's events or weddings, it means that I don't usually have time to swap out my lens, meaning the one that I'm using had better do a pretty good job at most scenarios. I also happen to run with a second camera at all times. So I would have the Fuji on a stabilizer, and then I have my Canon 80D on a crossbody strap. However, I don't find myself grabbing for it because the Fuji and the stock lens and the stabilizer look pretty dope. I mean, at 18, it's open all the way up to 2.8. Granted, as you progress up towards 55, you start to lose some speed in the aperture. So I mean, once I'm at 4, sure, 4 is not the greatest in the world. It's not exactly fast or good for low light. However, the Fuji body is actually super forgiving in low light. The ISO, I mean, you can crank that thing way up and get a super clear image. So the 4 isn't really a deal breaker. But for most wide shooting, just grabbing whatever's happening in the room, whatever's happening in the park, whatever's happening on the arena, this lens does this lens does a really great job. It does have all of your automatic features built in. One thing that I'm not loving about this lens is that the finish has started to wear off the lens really quickly. I mean, I haven't had this camera for too long, like just under a year, and this lens looks like it's been through hell. I've had lenses in the past with my Canon brand that still look brand new. Even the Fuji body, the finish just wears so much faster. I'm hoping that's something that they improve on later, but it doesn't really affect the actual functionality of the lens. It still works great, even if it looks super ratchet. The X-T3 body and kit lens currently is sitting at 2,400 Canadian, which is an amazing deal because the stock lens alone is sitting at $900. With the body alone going for around $1,900, you're saving about $400 on the stock lens if you buy them together. Besides, you can use the extra $400 to put it towards, I don't know, batteries. A lot of extra batteries. You're gonna need a lot of batteries for this camera. I obviously have a pretty significant wish list of lenses for the Fuji, but that's because they have a really great lineup with a lot of options, a lot of creative availability. Really, the list is impressive. I think my next investment is gonna be a telephoto or something with a little bit more of a zoom capability than the 55. At this point, when I really need that zoom, so a 70 to 200, I'm going back to using my Canon 80D. Most of the time, I don't need to have that much zoom, and I realize that there is the option to buy Metabones or some alternative kind of adapter so that I can use my Canon series lenses on my Fuji, but I would rather just take that money, because those adapters are not cheap, and invest it into a telephoto lens that is mirrorless optimized. If you happen to be interested in the other Fuji X lenses I've spoken about, or not really spoken about rather, but alluded to, I will leave a link below to my favorite camera retailer, Goslin Photo. You might be there for a while. My hair is like a small blanket. Just gonna air it out. That's a wrap. Thank God, because I turned off the air conditioning for this video and I am absolutely dying. If you've been watching the video up until this point, please go ahead and subscribe. I put out a lot of content that focuses specifically on the Fuji and freelancing. Chances are, if you're watching this video, it's probably up your alley. If you got anything out of this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Lastly, if you have anything you'd like to share with myself or the viewers and you want to share an opinion or a comment, or if I missed something, go ahead and leave a comment below. I would love to hear from you. All right, until next time, have a wonderful day. Now go make something awesome. Bye.